Welcome back to Automation Stage. Now we'll have another presentation from Benjamin Bischoff, Test Automation Engineer at Trivago NV, and he will be talking about smoke tests and mirrors, the magic in test automation.
Let me see. So, magicians have done controlled testing in human perception for thousands of years. That's a quote from Teller, from the duo Penn and Teller, and that is basically what drove me to do this presentation. So, I would like to talk about a few things today. Give an introduction again, just a very short one, because you have to when you present. I heard that. Give you a short glimpse into magic, show you 9 magic principles in software, and then some final thoughts. So yeah, that is me. I'm Benjamin, Test Automation Engineer at Trivago. As we already heard, I've been in tech about 22 years, and I have 7 years of software development in testing experience. And there's another side of me, which is I started doing magic at the age of 8. I'm now, let me think, I'm 44. So you see that has been quite a while, and actually more than doing testing and more than being in IT. My favorite genre is close-up magic, especially card magic. And yeah, I used to be a member of the Magic Circle in Germany, but that's another story that deserves a completely different presentation. Yeah, let's just say it was not for me. This presentation came along because I noticed some similarities between magic and software. And it all started with a series of blog posts on my website, softwaretester.blog, where I tried to link magic principles and software principles. And I also have a small, very, very small YouTube channel where I share magic and software-related videos that I try to connect. The inspiration for this came from mainly 2 books. One is Strong Magic by Darwin Ortiz, and the other one is 5 Points in Magic by Juan Tamariz. Both are not classic magic books that teach you tricks, but they talk about the psychology of magic and how to make your magic better, how to have a stage presence, how to behave on stage, things like this, which is also important when you present. And yeah, a little spoiler alert, it's all about making connections. It's about connecting your work to your hobby and your hobby to your work, and you will see, hopefully, that this can have some benefits. Now let's start with a very short glimpse into magic so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. This is my favorite definition of magic, which is the artful performance of impossible things that generates energy, delight, and wonder, by Lawrence Hass. And this is basically about bragging. It's not about showing off, look at what I can do. It's about generating a feeling of wonder. For the technical people among you, there's also a taxonomy of magic and a categorization of magic. Those are the genres of magic I could come up with. I'm sure there are more. I highlighted close-up because that's my favorite, but you also have comedy magic, you have street magic, you have mentalism, you have pickpocketing, escapology like Harry Houdini, lots of different stuff. And you can break down magic even further into illusion types. you have teleportations of objects, you have escapes, you have transformations, and many more. But I highlighted productions and vanishes here because if you want, you can actually break down most of those other subtypes into productions and vanishes. If you have an object turning into another object, we'll consider it one object disappearing while the other one is appearing at the same time. So a production and a vanish. Sometimes so-called Westcar papyrus, which was found in Egypt and then later sold by an English gentleman. It's dated around 1700 to 2000 before Christ, and it talks about King Cheops of Egypt and some magicians and priests performing for him. And actually, there are also descriptions of the tricks and the stunts that were performed, which is really fascinating. The middle one is the Discovery of Witchcraft by Reginald Scott. And this is a very important book because it exposed magic for the first time in order to save the ones that were being persecuted for being witches. So it was more of showing the public that there is no such thing as real magic and real witches. And the one on the right is called Hocus Pocus Junior, The Anatomy of Legerdemain. The author is unknown, but this is generally considered the first book on magic for entertainment purposes. So all of that before was more like making people believe in religion, in gods, or witches, and now it turned into this hobby and this entertainment thing. Some of my important influences, and yes, I realize they're all men, they're all white, but unfortunately, during the first area of magic, that was what magic looked like, male and white. This is changing now for the better, but I'm sorry for this. I hope this will change even more. The one on the left is Di Vernon. Um, if you ask anyone performing with cards, chances you will see a Di Vernon effect. He is called the Professor, and he has been a major influence on all close-up and especially card magicians. The one in the middle is Tony Slidini. Interesting story for him, because he did not have access to any magic books or any magic materials. So he made up his own kind of close-up magic. And he is a major inventor of principles that involve misdirection. And Juan Tamariz on the right, he's the one that is still alive, fortunately. He is a Spanish magician, and he is super famous among all magicians in the world because he wrote some of the most important books on the theory of magic. And like the one before, the 5 points in magic that I showed you, that has been a major influence for this one, for this presentation for me. And this is a super famous quote by Arthur C. Clarke, the writer. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And that is, I think, a nice bridge into the magic principles in software that I wanted to talk about. So without further ado, let's talk about the first one. It's misdirection. And there is a reason why I put the mis in parentheses, because it can also be a direction of attention to a certain point. The point of misdirection is to mislead, but never confuse the spectator. If I have a coin in my hand and I say, look, there is an elephant, this is not misdirection, this is just stupid. You have to misdirect in a way that has meaning. And there are two major principles here. One is the large action covers the small. If I do something, a small action with one hand, and if I do a large action with the other one at the same time, the small action is invisible. But it can also be that a small action covers a large action. If I direct your attention to a specific small point, then you don't see any large action from the other hand. But there's also misdirection in software. It's, for example, if you look at logs, if you look at some record of things going wrong, and you're trying to analyze what happened there, what happened in a specific bug, and you don't see the wood for the trees, as we say, you see too much information, so you cannot really pinpoint what was the cause of the bug. And also, there is unintentional misdirection if the software is designed in a bad way. And this is an example. This is one of those typical Java stack traces. If you just have the raw stack trace, and it generally exposes way too much information. So you really have to train yourself to read those stack traces and find what is the root cause of an issue. And also, this can lead to just staying in the perimeter of an error and searching it as a specific small place instead of stepping out and looking at the big picture, which can be really beneficial. The opposite can also be true. The opposite can also misdirect you if you don't see the stack traces at all. If you just see the raw error message and nothing else, that's what's called swallowing exceptions. You also have no idea where to look because you're misdirected on this very specific point. Yeah, what the eyes see and the ears hear, the mind believes. Harry Houdini said that. In case you didn't know, Harry Houdini, he was famous for escapology, but before that, he called himself the king of cards. So he was a big name in close-up magic as well. Let's go to the second one, which is force. And I don't mean physical force with this. I mean force in a magical sense. That means giving the illusion of free choice. That happens if a spectator chooses a card thinking they have completely free choice, but in reality, you control this choice. You can force a thought, you can force a thing like a card, or you can even force an action. But what I notice is the forcing yourself aspect. And forcing yourself in magic, that happens to a lot of people who start out in magic. When they learn a new effect, they want to show it and they want every people to see it. So I'm very sorry to my parents. I'm very sorry to my wife. They have to endure whenever I have a new magic effect and I force myself on them. The better way to do it is to wait until someone wants to see something. And that happens in software too. The forcing of yourself and the forcing of the solutions and tools that you think are the best ones, I see that constantly without understanding the problem first. So if I am, let's say, a Java expert and somebody has a problem, I say Java is the best programming language for this without knowing the details. And that is bad. And that leads to looking down from an ivory tower onto others, which is also socially bad. And this is a quote that stuck with me. The more you know, the more you realize you know nothing. And I think this is the main thing that distinguishes a junior from a senior. The seniors know what they don't know. We're already at the third one. It's repetition. And repetition in magic has two main purposes. Of course, repetition as a means of perfection, practice. If you repeat something over and over, you get good at this. But it depends on what you repeat. In magic, like in any other art forms or any other things you can do, if you practice the wrong thing or in the wrong way, it's very, very hard to unpractice this and relearn the right way. There's also a magic rule called never repeat a trick. Um, but this can be broken, and many professional magicians break this rule deliberately. You can ask the question, is my magic effect easy to figure out? If it is, then don't repeat it. If it's really hard to figure out, maybe it's worth repeating. Can you do the same effect with different methods? It might be worth repeating. And of course, the question, is it a good effect that you consider repeating because it makes the effect better? Repetition in software has also two meanings. It's the key to regression testing. It's running tests over and over, the same set of tests, like in test automation, to spot behavior changes and to make sure that you have a known state of a system, even after refactoring, even after you had a bug that has been fixed. But there's also the way of repeating as a training, like in Magic, practicing your software development, your testing. For this, you have katas, code katas, test katas, which are small problems that you can just practice outside of a work context to get better in your way to approach those problems. And typically, like in code katas, you solve this problem by an algorithm, and after you're done, you throw away your code and you try it again a week later, and you will see that you got better. There's also repetition in monitoring. Without repetition, monitoring would just give you a one-time snapshot of the state of a system or the state of an API. And what we do at Trivago is also use synthetic monitoring, which is running user-based scenarios as a means to determine if an application is not just available, but it's also usable. And we found out that this kind of monitoring is actually faster and gives us better results than just checking if you get a 404 or a 200. Bruce Lee said, I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. So practice makes perfect, even in software development. Clarity is our number 4. Clarity in magic means keep your effects clear. Keep your effects easy to understand and easy to follow. And what's really, really important is the initial state has to be established. Otherwise, you don't see a state change. Like if I just show you my fist and say there's a coin inside, and then open it and say, now it's gone. Well, I didn't establish the initial state strongly enough. So there's nothing that impresses you. But if I show you the coin and then open the hand and it's gone, that is something that is impressive. In software, especially in testing, clarity is really important. Keeping your test scenarios compact, and I don't necessarily mean compact in very, very short, but I mean compact in the things they do and the things they test. Because then it's much, much easier to link the cause and the effect of a certain defect, of a certain bug. It avoids boredom, which is really important. If you look at 1,000 test reports in a row, and you constantly have to go through a lot of steps and a lot of different things that could cause a bug. And it helps to keep focus, which is linked to the avoiding boredom. And clarity is also super important in test reporting and failure reporting, because it's necessary that you directly see the test results, you directly see which test scenarios failed, you have the right information without clutter, and this helped us too, having the same test reports across all projects or most of the projects. So people who are involved in testing and analysis can seamlessly switch to another project because the reporting structure is the same. By the way, this is an open source reporting library that started here at Trivago, and it's freely available. If you're interested, just check out this QR code. Yeah, confusion is not magic. Di Vernon, the person I showed you in the beginning, said that, and this is absolutely true. Don't confuse the spectators, don't confuse the users. It's the same thing. Number 5, framing. Framing is tricky. Framing in Magic means finding a context for an effect. And we have two different kinds of contexts. We have the contented context and we have the situational context. And the contented context is taking a magic effect and making it relevant, telling a story with it, linking it to something that connects with the audience. Because if you just show a pure magic effect without any meaning, without any talking, without something that the audience can relate to, it's just a puzzle. It's just a puzzle that your audience wants to find out and nothing more. And the situational context is that the thing you perform must fit the setting, the occasion, and the location. Like I couldn't go to a kid's birthday party and bring in an elephant to vanish. It has to fit the setting, occasion, and location. Or if I would ever perform at a funeral and go there in a clown outfit, that would also not fit the situational context. In software, it's about having a reasoning and a frame for your ideas and your plans. Because if you phrase your ideas poorly, it can totally fail. And this is actually what happened to us, or what almost happened to us. We had this team intent framing problem. A little story, we used to have a QA team and development teams, and there was a very good communication between the two, very good collaboration. And then I joined the company in a newly formed test automation team, which was the third corner of this triangle. And there was a lot of bias. We had bias towards the QA team, we had bias towards the developers, and vice versa. We were not connected, and we were detached from the people and their needs, and we were just focusing on providing technical solutions for test automation and pushing test automation into our software development life cycles. But we never communicated why we want to do that. And we never really listened. And this was exactly what I talked about before, sitting in your ivory tower, forcing yourself on other teams and forcing your solutions on other people. And this is almost why this whole test automation project at Trivago failed, until the test automation was integrated into QA, closer to the customers, and taking advantage of the good communication between QA and developers that was already there, and starting to talk, which was really important and saved us. Yeah, the House of Magic has many rooms. Eugene Berger, who is sadly no longer with us, was the master of finding stories for magic effects. And he meant with this quote that you can present one effect multiple times. There are unlimited ways to do that. We're coming to time lapse. And time lapse is just the time between two different things, two different events. And time lapse is a form of misdirection, sometimes a good one, sometimes a bad one. Taking the coin in the hand and then opening my hand 1 hour later and the coin is gone. It might have been the best coin vanish you have ever seen, but if there's an hour in between the initial state and the end state, this is not magic. This is just boring. Because the longer the time between two events is, the less clear it is. And this brings us back to software because time lapse is super important. Reporting and monitoring has to be on time. If it's not on time, if you see the reports from today, next week, they don't mean anything anymore. And timing is super important. And especially important, it is in test feedback. That is where the whole idea of shifting left comes from. Testing earlier in the pipeline, in the software delivery pipeline, and informing the people earlier, and running specific test suites, like short running test suites. And if they fail, don't continue, just fail everything and inform the people at this stage. Because the secret is failing fast and learning fast from it. And of course, you need very fast communication channels for this in order to work. If you fail, but you fail at the same time to inform the right people that a failure occurred, this also means nothing. Yeah, Albert Einstein said the only reason for time is so that everything doesn't happen at once. And I think that is a great quote. We are already at number 7, only 3 to go. Conviction. And conviction is not easy to explain, I found. In Magic, that means that spectators have to be convinced of the initial state I talked about before to fully appreciate changes. And that is exactly what I meant with, if I show you my fist and say there's a coin in it and now it's gone, this is not magic because the spectators were not convinced there was actually a coin in my hand. And it is better to convince implicitly. Like, for example, if I give one of you a deck of cards and say, this is a perfectly normal, absolutely ordinary shuffled deck of cards, you wouldn't be convinced. But if I just give you a deck of cards without saying anything, you would be probably convinced it's just a normal, ordinary shuffled deck of cards. And this is what I mean with it's better to convince implicitly. Conviction also plays a role in software and in testing because conviction is stronger than assumptions. You can assume something. If you assume I have a coin in my hand and now it's gone, it's kind of okay. But if you're convinced, it's much, much stronger. The intention of a system has to be clear to detect deviation. You have to be convinced that you know what the system should do so that you can really be sure that if something else happens, it's a deviation. And this is where BDD comes in. BDD, behavior-driven development, is where all the roles of this software development life cycle, I would say, come together and talk about requirements in a way that everybody understands those requirements. And then the developers can go on, take those requirements and develop. The testers can take those requirements and do testing. The project managers know exactly what has to be done and what has to be planned. That's the idea behind it, so that everyone is on the same page. And then communication conviction is also important. We have to trust that all people in our team give the best and work towards the same cause. And this is the thing with BDD, especially getting everyone on the same page. Also, with the example with the triangle of the three teams, getting everyone on the same page is way more important than just starting to develop something and pushing it onto people. And you have to speak a ubiquitous language, which can be hard. But like if you talk to non-technical people, you don't talk in a technical language. You have to talk in a language that everybody understands. And Teller, again, the magician said, we estimate the intelligence of the audience as being greater than ours. And this is important. Don't underestimate people you talk to. Don't underestimate people that you need to provide solutions for. Failure, number 8. Failure in magic can be a stylistic device. There is this plot, it's called Magician in Trouble, is where a magician fails with a trick and then fixes it by magic. That is a presentational hook you can use for magic effects. You shouldn't use that too often, but it can be effective. And of course, failure and learning from failure plays a role here too. Improving your magic by analyzing failed performances. Like, I have to be honest, I failed with my first performance in this presentation, but I will analyze it, I will learn from it, and I will know what went wrong and how to make it better. Failure in software, especially important in testing. I've seen this happen, not a lot, but I've seen it happen before. Also with the tests that I wrote, the automated tests, don't trust tests that never failed before, because chances that they will never fail even if there is a bug. And failure is the essence of TDD, of test-driven development. Um, for those who might not know, test-driven development is a development technique for software where you write your unit tests first without having a code or a piece of code to run that against. And then you start your implementation until the test is green. Then you write another test of functionality you would like to have, and then you implement this again. And on the flip side, if something fails, it should be covered with a test to prevent it from failing again. That is this failing fast, learning fast. There are also special kinds of meetings and processes called SDLC postmortems, which can be meetings, which can be emails or messages, video presentations. It's about presenting your failures and it's about presenting your lessons learned. Because it doesn't really mean that much if you fail and you are the only one learning from it. Other people should be able to learn from your mistakes as well. And we found it's one of the best tools to improve, to just be open about things that went wrong instead of hiding them and trying to seem perfect. Thomas Edison said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Number 9, final one, hidden complexity. Magicians generally want to hide their skills. It's different than in other art forms. Like when you are a classical musician, you don't want to hide your skills. If you play something that is hard, you it looks hard. For magicians, they don't want to do that. They want to make it seem that the magic is happening on its own, ideally. In software, this is often the case that there is complexity that should be hidden, like only showing choices to the users when they're needed, and also not propagating the whole stack trace to the front end or to APIs, which I have seen before. And error messages to users, especially, have to be meaningful and they have to contain action items for the user. If a user is presented with, oh, oops, something went wrong, try it again later, the users don't have an idea of what went wrong, when is later, what they can do. So this is not good. In UI and user experience, that plays a very important role. This is the case of limiting options for better user experience from the Trivago website. Here you can select the number of people you want to stay at a hotel with, and you see that the minus buttons are grayed out because they are not needed at this case. Also, the reset button is grayed out and not usable because nothing was changed before. This is an example of disabling elements depending on the context. And it also enables a straightforward, happy path for the user, and they can make less mistakes. Grady Booch said, the function of good software is to make the complex appear to be simple. And I totally agree. And this is the same for Magic too. Like this one, this is an example from Trivago. It's the upper right one is a big Maven command to run automated tests. And the lower right part is the refactored one that is used in our CI/CD pipelines and also locally. It's just putting a make file in front of this huge complexity, so the users don't have to deal with this huge command. That's one of my favorite quotes that explains what quality is. Quality is the absence of unnecessary friction. And now I would like to have 1-2 more minutes for final thoughts. I just want to say this thing of connecting hobbies and your profession is great. It sparks creativity. It makes the transfer of learning really satisfying. It helps you to break out of programmer's block, of writer's block. And I really encourage you to try it with your own hobbies and interests. I will skip a little bit here because we're getting close to the end. I just want to tell you that we do knowledge exchanges in QA where we present technical and non-technical topics. And I would say a quarter of the topics are completely unrelated to technical and non-technical work-related topics, but they're just people presenting about their hobbies. And that is really, really refreshing to see, and it makes a big difference. And this one, best practices, that's something, a pet peeve of mine. My perception is there are no best practices for every situation. They can be adjusted or turned upside down, like the rule of never repeating a trick in Magic that can be broken if it makes an effect better. And this is where we get back to the point of this talk about making connections, about connecting work, connecting hobbies, because both can benefit from each other. And with this, thanks a lot. Um, if it's possible, I would like to try one last little effect for you. For this, I would like you please to take away the presentation. Great, thank you. And it's just a little thing. If you uh, if you assume something, if you assume that the solution to a problem lies somewhere, that's what I talked about. The assumption. There is a big chance that you can be absolutely wrong because it's somewhere completely different. And if you look at a wrong place, that might happen. The solution may actually be here, but it causes another problem. And especially in a microservice architecture, you might think that this service is the cause of the problem, when in reality, it's this service over here. So always be clear, always know your requirement, always know the right people to talk to, because otherwise you might look in a completely wrong place because the solution is in a place that you least expect. And with this, thank you again. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Benjamin. That was really magical presentation. And we do have a few questions, but before I'm starting to read them, could you please share the link, not the link, but the QR code to the reporting? So I'm gonna
The
have the string here. Yeah.
reporting one, just let me find it again. Too many slides. Here it is.
Okay. So then I'm gonna read the most upvoted question. Patricia is asking how to encourage the communication between QA and QA automation and dev teams. What are your tips and tricks?
The tips and tricks is to start communicating. that is uh, that is, I think, the most important thing, because that's what we fail to do. Try to understand the problems, talk to the people who have the problems. If you have a new idea, talk about it first before evaluating technologies, before implementing something, because everybody has to agree that A, we have a problem, B, we need a solution, and C, that the solution you're suggesting is a good one. So unfortunately for many developers and software testers, communication solves a lot of problems. And I know when I started being a software developer, I did not want to communicate, but I noticed the hard way that it is absolutely necessary.
That's so true. Okay, so we have only 1 minute left, and then the last question would be, uh, how did you learn to do magic?
Oh, wow. Yeah, when I started learning magic, there was no YouTube, there was no internet. So I started learning by books mostly, and then later by meeting with people. You have magic conferences, you have magic clubs, you have. I have a small magic uh, team here at work where we meet regularly. Um, yeah, and most the best way to learn is to have a mentor of some sort, like in also in development and testing.
Yeah, totally agree with that one as well. So yeah, thank you for the presentation. That was really useful. Unfortunately, we couldn't answer all the questions, but please come back to this stage in 15 minutes, because we're gonna have another presentation from Baris Sarialoglu, and the presentation will be why is the test automation still manual and how can we make it really automated. So have a like a nice short break before the next session. Thank you, Benjamin, once more, and
Thank you for having me.
good luck with learning even more magic tricks in the future. Looking forward to them.